I say something? Oh, there we go. I will let everyone know that we are just running a few minutes late as we wait for participants and speakers to join, but please do join and we will start shortly.
Oh.
Welcome, Prof.
Okay, thanks. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Glad you're with us.
Had a little trouble getting on, but anyway, it worked out.
There you go. It's perfect.
Okay, how are you keeping?
I'm doing well, and you?
Okay, so how's Cambridge?
Cambridge is going great. Yes, middle exams, and I'm learning lots. How's Montreal?
Well, I'm in Jerusalem.
You're in Jerusalem, of course.
I'm in Jerusalem. Yeah. So I'm where everything is happening at this point.
Yes. Oh, okay. Wow. Well, maybe I'll call next week. Does that sound okay?
Sorry, you broke up a bit.
Maybe I'll give you a call next week to catch up.
No, with pleasure. I want to talk to you about a number of things. Absolutely.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Wonderful.
You're looking terrific, I've got to tell you.
Thank you. Well, it is so nice to forward to learning from you today. And we're just waiting for Eloge. She's just coming from a meeting.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the last one on then.
No.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Stephen Toop while you've been at Cambridge?
You know, it's on my list. I'm actually going to write him tomorrow, so I should.
Okay.
Just a gift.
And let me tell you, when does your time in Cambridge end?
My time ends on June 24th.
Okay. So I want to speak to you about future plans.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Wonderful. And so I'm just looking to see, Jason, has Eloge joined? I know we have a number of participants with us. Wonderful.
Next.
Joe,
I'll open up the gallery view. Yeah.
Hannah, am I
Yes.
on? Am I on?
are you on? Is this Joe?
Yes.
Joe, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay. I can see you and I can hear you.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you just look in bottom left-hand corner of your screen, can you see the video button?
No, I don't.
Not a worry. I'm just looking here. Can you look at the right side of your screen? Do you see a icon that looks like a camera? Oh,
Yeah, got it.
perfect. Wonderful. So wonderful.
Now, I should mute myself when other people are speaking, correct?
Yes, and you absolutely. And I'm just looking here. Someone has just said, after I've made you go through all of that, that actually your video should be off until your remarks. So I apologize, but we have troubleshot it. So if you could now unmute yourself, or now mute yourself, and now put your camera off and turn those on when you do your remarks, that would be ideal.
So I mute myself initially and then I turn the camera off.
Yep.
Okay, so I will.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right, and so for all those gathered, I'm just going to give you the 2-minute warning. Thank you for your patience with us as we troubleshoot. One of the gifts of COVID is the ability to connect all around the world. As you probably heard when you first tuned in, I'm coming to you from Cambridge, England. Joe, I actually don't know where you're coming to us from, although I have already admired your ceilings. It's a beautiful backdrop. Professor Cotler is coming to us from Jerusalem, and there's a number of you that I know are tuning in from all around the world. So in an age where there is a glut of Zoom links and information, we're so very grateful that you have made time to join us today. So we'll return in just about 1 minute when our final participant is able to join us. In the meantime, if you wanted to grab a glass of water, a quick bio break, we will be right back.
I'll grab a glass of water.
Good idea.
Hannah,
Yes,
I still don't know how to get the camera off. Am I still on?
you're still on. Yeah. So do you know how to mute yourself?
Yes.
Okay, so look right next to the microphone. Do you see the little icon of the camera?
I can't see it. And I'm also not full screen. I don't know what happened that took me off this full screen.
Don't worry. You know what? Blessed are the flexible. We will just so.
I'm fine.
Perfect. Sounds
Okay.
good.
So I'm going to mute myself again.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. So that's excellent. As we wait, people introducing themselves in the chat. So yeah, we would love to hear about where you are. And I actually see that our last guests have joined us. So I'm just going to pull up my remarks and we will get started. That will be the 30-second warning because I just said you could all go and get some water. So we'll just let you sort of return to where you're sitting. Perfect. Good. All right. Well, welcome. My name is Hannah Marazzi, and I'm an alumna of the March of Remembrance and Hope program from 2015. I'm currently tuning in to be with you all from Cambridge University in England, where I'm an MPhil student of public policy. We're so grateful you can join us today, and we're sensitive to the fact that if your inbox is anything like mine, you've had many invitations competing for your time. So we are grateful that you've stopped in the middle of the noise to join us for what we think is an extremely timely and important conversation. Today, we are gathered to speak about genocide. Never has it been more important than now to stop and collectively listen, to join together, to bear witness to the testimony of survivors, to raise our voices in unison, to affirm our commitment to the principle of never again. And yet, as one of our guests today, my dear mentor and teacher, the Honorable Irwin Cotler, often says, we said never again after the Holocaust, and yet it has happened again and again and again. Just before I introduce our guests, I wanted to say a little bit about the March of Remembrance and Hope, the organization that has brought us here together today. Many of you are alumni from the March of Remembrance and Hope. Others of you are tuning in and hearing about this organization for the first time. Welcome. I first went as a student in 2015 and then came back as staff in 2016 before chairing the Alumni Volunteer and Recruitment Committee from 2015 to 2019. When sharing about this experience, I often describe it as the program that broke me wide open and made me whole all over again, cementing a lifelong commitment to speaking up against hatred, intolerance, and injustice. The March of Remembrance and Hope is a dynamic educational leadership program founded in 2001. Its purpose is to teach students of different religious and ethnic backgrounds about the dangers of intolerance through the study of the Holocaust and to better promote relations among people of diverse cultures. Presently, MRH is sponsored on an annual basis in Canada by the Jewish Federations of Canada, UIA, after being run for several years by the Canadian Centre for Diversity. Though the international iteration of MRH is currently on hold, American groups such as Nazareth College and Hobart and William Smith colleges have traveled in the past with Canadian MRH delegations and have subsequently launched their own programs. And now it is my joy to welcome the Honorable Irwin Cotler. Professor Cotler is the chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights, an emeritus professor from McGill University, and Canada's Special Envoy for preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. It is also my privilege to welcome Eloge Butera. Eloge is a survivor of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, former director of the Dallaire Institute, Africa Center of Excellence on Children, Peace and Security, and a 2007 alumnus. Eloge is also on the board of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights. I hope you'll forgive me for sharing a short personal reflection at this point in my opening remarks. You see, each of these gentlemen have been my teachers. I first met Professor Cotler, or Prof, as those of us who have been mentored by him call him, when I was just 23 years old. I was placed in his office to assist in the organization of the Nuremberg Legal Symposium, an event that marked the 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg laws coming into effect and the 70th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. Despite the full schedule that placed incredible demands on his time, he always took me under his wing and has been my teacher ever since, always taking care to remind me that truth and kindness can tip the scales of justice in the world, if only we remain faithful in our commitment to speak truth to power. Eloge answered the phone so many times that year as I stepped into his shoes, filling a role he had previously held. His patience, sense of humor, and deep kindness were formative for this young woman, as each encounter reminded me of what embodied resilience, brilliance, and kindness could look like in human form. Today, we want to extend the learning that for many participants began or was further nurtured on MRH. If you are not a participant on MRH, we want to welcome you to this important conversation. As we proceed, we welcome you to reflect on what each of us can do in our own lives to support human rights, genocide awareness and prevention, and speak out against the many forms of hate that are so insidious and pernicious. Before we proceed to the main proceedings, a word on process. Our current chair of the MRH Alumni Volunteer and Recruitment Committee, Jason Ho, is on hand to monitor the chat function for the event. So please do feel free to participate, place your thoughts and conversations in there, your questions as well. I saw some people introducing themselves. That is so wonderful. We're here to cultivate conversation, but also community. So questions will be selected from there to guide our Q&A following the conversation. And also this event is the first of many. So we hope, if you don't already, that you'll give us a follow on social media. Jason's going to drop the links in the chat now. So if you want to take a moment and give us a follow, we would appreciate that. And now, gentlemen, thank you for gifting us your time, your stories, your wisdom. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for this important discussion. Prof, Joel, the pleasure and an honor to be with you this afternoon to discuss this file that is as important as it is timely, given the state of the world and the state of our societies really writ large. So I want to start with you, Prof, and I think we will do a deep dive about the meaning of the march and the learning that we've all had the chance to do in Poland, the actual site of the Holocaust. But I'm speaking to you this morning or this afternoon live from Jerusalem, and I guess everyone would expect us to ask you, how are you doing? How is everyone coping over the last few days that have been certainly very stressful?
Well, as you know, some 1,500 rockets have been launched by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, targeting cities and towns in Israel, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, really right across the centrality of civilian life in Israel. And let's remember, you know, from a legal point of view, although I don't want to reduce it to that, that the widespread and systematic attacks targeting a civilian population as a matter of policy constitute under international law, you know, war crimes and crimes against humanity. And regrettably, this is what has been taking place. Also, these missiles have been launched from residential centers so that Palestinians and innocent Palestinians have been held hostage as human shields. And then the final part I want to mention, because I don't think this is not being fully appreciated or even reported, and that is the incendiary incitement, the calls by Hamas and Islamic Jihad on Israeli Arabs, let alone with respect to Palestinians, to kill Jews, stating this outright, to torch synagogues, to burn schools. And in fact, one of the worst parts of this is not only the launching of the attacks with the missiles from Gaza, but in fact, the way this has disturbed Israeli Arab peaceful coexistence in cities like Lod and Ramleh and Jaffa and Haifa, with incendiary incitement by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, calling upon Israeli Arabs to engage in this criminality in the killing of Jews. And regrettably, we have been witness to that as well. So in a word, this ends up killing innocents on both sides. And I think those of us, and I think all of us who cherish human life, every civilian death is a tragedy. But at the same time, we have to know where the responsibility lies, and that this is a war between terrorist organizations on the one hand and a democracy, however imperfect it may be, like Israel on the other. We should ask ourselves, if missiles were being rained down on Montreal and Toronto, we would expect our government, our Canadian government, also to defend us.
Thank you very much. And it's there's a unique stress that comes with the context of war, the sound of gunfire and rockets, and it's not always a hopeful place to be speaking from, especially if you have to even look further back to an even grimmer context of genocide rooted in anti-Semitism, planned and executed to the grand scale of the Holocaust. Goes without saying that things like the Hamas Charter takes very unique inspiration to documents that preceded the Holocaust, and many of us on this call have had the privilege of understanding how some of these insidious form of hatred get embedded into documents, and sometimes in the case of the Nuremberg laws actually turned into law and become an organizing feature of society. So hang in there, and you will certainly, and the family and everyone there has our thoughts and prayers. Let's then, I guess, take a step back to a few decades back, growing up in Montreal, city that many of us on the march have very close affinity and affection to. What was your life like growing up in the center of pretty much the political action for the country, but also the minority within a minority culture of English-speaking Montreal, in the shadow of obviously the end of the Holocaust and the Second World War?
Well, I was born on May 8th, 1940. So I just recently celebrated my 81st birthday. My father of blessed memory was born in Lithuania. He came to Montreal at 1 year old, and the family lived in the eastern part of Montreal. So my father's first language was, in fact, French. And he remained, if I could put it that way, a Francophile for the rest of his life. My mother was born in Montreal, but my maternal grandparents were also from Europe, Lithuania, Russia, and the like. And you would not have known that my mother was born in Montreal because she sort of experienced the Holocaust as if she had been there and witnessed it herself. Now, I mentioned this because on May 8th, 1945, my 5th birthday turned out to be VE Day, the end of the Second World War. And I remember the incredible celebration in our household. I lived with my grandparents. We lived in what was then an extended family, sometimes an embarrassment for me with my friends all having a nuclear family. But it was an extended family. And I remember the jubilation with the end of the war. But as years passed, I then began to learn from my parents, my teachers at school who were Holocaust survivors in the Jewish Day School of Talmud Torah. I then learned what had happened before my 5th birthday. I then learned, that the Holocaust, as my mentor Elie Wiesel would remind us again and again, was a war against the Jews in which not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were targeted victims. I learned of the demonization and dehumanization of the Jew as prologue and justification for the mass murder of Jews. I learned that the death camp Auschwitz was the most brutal extermination camp of the 20th century, that 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp. 1.1 million of them were Jews. And let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism did not die at Auschwitz, and it remains the bloodied canary in the mineshaft of global evil today. And as we've learned only too well and too painfully, that while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews. And so the intersection between the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, of the Holocaust as a paradigm for radical evil, just as anti-Semitism is a paradigm for radical hate. And then, and I'll close with this, I also learned that the Holocaust did not happen all of a sudden, that there was a path to the Holocaust. Interestingly enough, and it's not all that well known, the first concentration camp was established at Dachau in 1933, that the Nuremberg race laws were passed in 1935, that Kristallnacht occurred in 1938. In a word, and as Elie Wiesel would also remind us again and again, the danger of silence in the face of evil, the danger of indifference and inaction in the face of mass atrocity and genocide, the danger of la trahison de clair, the complicity of the elites in Nazi Germany from 1933 on, lawyers, judges, scientists, doctors, church leaders, architects, engineers who built the death camps. All of these were complicit in the Holocaust, along with the collaborators from different countries who made it possible. So I learned about horrors too terrible to be believed, the Holocaust, but I also learned that there was a path that led to those horrors. And there are, in a sense, for us, universal lessons arising from the Holocaust with regard to subsequent genocides. And I'll close this with one point on this. And that has to do with the dangers of indifference and inaction in the face of mass atrocity and genocide. What makes the horrors of the Holocaust so unspeakable? What makes the genocide of the Tutsis that you experienced, Eloge, so unspeakable, and the genocides that followed are not only the horrors of the Holocaust, the genocides themselves, and I make no analogies between the Holocaust and the others, but in terms of the universality of the lessons, what makes them so unspeakable is that they were preventable. Nobody could say we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. Just as today, as we are meeting, nobody could say with regard to the mass atrocities targeting the Uyghurs in Xinjiang region in China, nobody can say we do not know. We know, and we are still not acting.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that, Prof. I think two very vivid images that come to me is as a survivor having lived through the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda and growing up in a context where you're trying to rebuild a life, you're trying to make your life feel normal, and family, birthdays and other events seem, weddings, life events seem normal, but all those have to happen in the shadow of the unspeakable that has already happened, that is a living memory for the people around the table and the people around you. So I can very much relate to that experience of going to Torah school, growing up with these survivors with very painful memory that are very much in every bit a recent past. And the other piece,
if I may, Eloge, because you reminded me of something, I'll be very brief, is that, as it happens this year, both the Yom HaShoah, National Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the Tutsi genocide both fell on the same time. And, in terms of the Tutsis, I always remember there were 10,000 Tutsis were murdered every day, as you know, from April 7th till the beginning of July in 1994. Every day. And the international community, including the Security Council, dithered and delayed. And nobody could say at that point, we did not know. And so when I was asked why did I enter politics when I was then a law professor at McGill Daily newspaper asked me, why are you entering politics? I said, one word. They said, what's that? I said, Rwanda. And they said, Rwanda? What? I said, because something like that ever rears its head again, I want to be in parliament where maybe I can try and do something out of it, than trying to bang on the doors of parliament while the genocide of the Tutsis was going on and not finding any action by the Canadian government or others.
Yes, and I think we could see these parallels in terms of what Europe was like in the years leading up to the Holocaust, the Nuremberg laws, the program Kristallnacht, a number of warning signs for which different countries and different societies responded, sometimes with indifference and sometimes with just sheer contempt. We as Canadian obviously are very well familiar with the none is too many policy, but in the case of Rwanda, we are now discovering actually how much did we know, because some of the archives of the French government, which was very close to the government in place in Rwanda at the time, we have a number of archives and classified information being released, showing very much that so many knew and so many understood the depth and the willingness to go to the extreme. There were memos explaining that the people are being trained to exterminate 1,000 people an hour using machetes and clubs. But the ability to, I guess, rise to really respond to our better angels and rise to the occasion and respond with policy and reaction kept on remaining completely absent. And it's really, I think, part of that discussion we had at the MRH when we went to Germany and Poland, to try to understand as young professionals and young university students, how is this possible? If this is possible in a very underdeveloped society like Rwanda, where you needed to mobilize millions to this project by indoctrination and propaganda, if it's possible in a very advanced industrialized society like Germany, it's probably possible anywhere else in between, which happens to be everywhere. And in the words of our friend Payam Akavan, these are not natural disasters. They are literally man-made industries of death and destruction. I want us to, I guess, take you back to your first visit to Europe, to Poland, the same way as we did. What were your impression? How was your trip? What did you learn? And how did that influence your future career and professional choices?
Well, in the summer of 1962, I was one of some 30 Canadian students who got a World University Service Fellowship, WUS Fellowship, as it was called. It was given to go to different countries every summer. That summer, it was to Poland. And we were there for 3 months. And we traveled to Poland overland on bus. And I remember going through, landing first in Amsterdam and then going through Germany, with all that resonated for me, being my first overseas trip. And then through Prague, and Prague was very Stalinist at that time, under communist control. And then we were in Poland, and we had a group of 30 Polish students who were assigned to us. And I remember one vivid experience. The head of the Polish student group was someone named Jakubowicz. And when I went to the synagogue in Krakow, on a Saturday, it was the first city we visited, and I went to the synagogue there, and on the wall there was the names of some of the founders, and it said Jakubowicz. So after, when I was speaking with him, I said, I was in the synagogue and I saw Jakubowicz's name. I said, is that a relative of yours? He says to me, no, he says, and I'm not Jewish. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I thought the name Yakubovich was a Jewish name. And he said, yes, it's a Jewish name. I was born Jewish, but I'm now a communist. And that was our parallel student. But the one experience I want to relate, because it had such a powerful impact, is we were taken one day to the death camp Auschwitz. And, you know, I still remember going through the gate, Arbeit macht frei, and I guess I'm always clumsy, such that I ended up ripping open parts of my shoulder with a barbed wire at the time. It's a remembrance I still have as an innocent person coming there in '62, and even then something could happen. But the thing is, the tour guide who took us around was telling us about those who were murdered at Auschwitz. Poles, Russians, Hungarians, Czechs. And I said to him, you know, I had seen the suitcases, I knew Jewish history, and I said, well, what about Jews that were murdered here? I said, look at the suitcases, look at the names. Schwartz, Rosenberg. Oh, he said, these are all Russians, Poles, Czechs. In other words, this was 1962. And when was depersonalizing the whole nature of the Holocaust, as I said earlier from Ellie, was as a war against the Jews, in which not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were targeted victims. When we left that day at Auschwitz, we were on a bus. And there were four of us who were Jewish and the rest were not. The four Jews, we were sitting in different parts of the bus, but we noted afterwards that we were all silent. We didn't speak. We just were not engaging with our fellow students who were engaging with each other, but we couldn't speak. And then we had a month free after that 3-month time in Poland. And we all decided independently, the four of us, that we would go to Israel. And that was for us really our own March of the Living before the March of the Living occurred. And just one last experience. While we were in Poland, we had a side trip to Russia, and I met with Russian Jews, and they spoke to me in Yiddish. I understood Yiddish from my family, and I'll never forget the message they sent to us. They said, "Merhaban Meira." In other words, we live in fear. And then the key thing, "Vergesst uns nicht." Don't forget us. Please don't forget us. And so when I came back from that trip to Poland and Israel, I organized the first ever student demonstration for Soviet Jewry at McGill University, while then as a law student. And that began my involvement in the struggle for Soviet Jewry, which arose out of that trip to Poland, and which then led to my involvement with Sharansky, other political prisoners, and the like.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think it's a very striking response, because I do remember both visiting Auschwitz. I remember the really the overwhelming impact of Treblinka, looking at those stones and the names of villages after village and after village of people who take that long train ride never to come back. But also the fact that the Holocaust was happening very close and personal in many Jewish villages in Eastern Europe, far before many people started being sent to concentration camp. There were these Ansens groupings actually going village to village, systematically carrying out mass murders and burying people in mass grave. I vividly remember a visit to Tikuchin, one of these small towns where everyone in the village was marched to the center of the town with everybody looking, and some locals participating, and then completely murdered in this forest. And I think it's really that temptation of looking at genocide as big numbers, 1 million Tutsis, 6 million Jews, when in the words of the poets, every one of those people is a universe in their own right. Every one of those people has a name, they have a story, and the overwhelming impact of those piles of shoes and those piles of really the ashes of from this crematorium is something that I found personally very powerful to witness, but also to witness the complexity of the industrial process of creating the machinery of murder. You needed those rails to work. You needed these huge compounds to be built, and they were not built too far from inhabited villages. Locals could see, and in many cases very well knew what was going on throughout these events, which brings me back to the almost as much as there's a certain banality in the events that conspire to make genocides possible. There's also the temptation for societies and communities to look away, and in sometimes opening up windows for denial to take place. The ability for communist Russia to say, well, all these were Russians when they were murdered and taken into the camps for being Jewish. And how did that work, in addition to obviously really being prompted to respond with action on behalf of Jewish, the Soviet Jewry, but also on behalf of people like Nelson Mandela and other really individuals, but who embodied the identities and the reality of the societies to whom they belonged. How did that call to action from that bus ride or the other trip back to Israel shape, I guess, the early days of your career, and obviously it's still probably happening to this very day?
It very much shaped my career, as did early teachings of my parents of blessed memory. It was my father who would speak to me before I could understand the profundity of his words. When he would say to me that the pursuit of justice, and then he would repeat it in Hebrew, tzedek, tzedek, that the pursuit of justice, as he put it, was equal to all the other commandments combined. This, as he put it, is that what you must teach onto your children, a kind of intergenerational responsibility. And then this must be your moral compass. This is what must guide you in life. And then it was my mother of blessed memory, when she would hear my father saying these things to me, would say to me, you know, if you want to pursue justice, you have to understand, you have to feel the injustice about you. You have to go in and about your community and beyond and feel the injustice and combat the injustice. Otherwise, the pursuit of justice will remain, as you say, a theoretical abstraction. So as a result of these teachings of my parents, and I mentioned to teachers that were Holocaust survivors, Ali Wiesel and the like, I got involved in the two great human rights struggles of the second half of the 20th century. I mentioned the struggle for Soviet Jewry, but the other was the struggle against apartheid. And I got involved with the two people who were the face, the vision, the hope of those struggles, Anatoly Sharansky in the former Soviet Union and Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And both of them were fighting for the same thing. They were both fighting for freedom. They were both fighting for democracy. They were both fighting for equality. They were both fighting for peace. In other words, their struggles in the two great human rights struggles of the second half of the 20th century remain the same struggles for us now in the 21st century. And regrettably, while we spoke about, the Holocaust and Rwanda, I remember as a parliamentarian, co-sponsoring a resolution to create April as a Genocide Prevention Month in the Canadian Parliament. And so we commemorated, the Armenian genocide, we commemorated the Holodomor, the Holocaust, of course, what happened to the Tutsis in Rwanda and former Yugoslavia in terms of the Muslims. But, since we moved that resolution, tragically, it never ended with that. I mean, we had Darfur, we had the Yazidis, we had the Rohingya, we have at this point what is happening with the Uyghurs in China. So, as Hannah said at the beginning, it's like never again became yet again, again, and again. And sometimes, even though we created April's Genocide Prevention Month, I find that April passed this year with the parliamentarians not exactly remembering that we had established April's Genocide Prevention Month. So we have, the danger of forgetting and the imperative of remembrance, le devoir de mémoire, of not only remembering, but acting on these lessons of history. Because if we want to, in fact, prevent mass atrocities and genocide, we have to learn the lessons of what took us down the path to it. And one lesson that I did not mention is the dangers, in particular, of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and genocide. As the Supreme Court of Canada put it, the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. These, as the court put it, are the chilling facts of history. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism.
Thank you for that, Prof. And I think in your professional life, especially as a parliamentarian and the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, there's so much we can dive into, including the passage for the first time ever of a Civil Marriage Act for our country, first national human trafficking strategy, first strategy for the prosecution of war crime and genocide perpetrators who were within the reach of the government of Canada. There's obviously a lot of really rolling of sleeves and getting into the weeds of policy and politics and lawmaking to respond on crisis, whether historical or in real time as they're happening. Don't know if you want to take a minute to just a minute to talk a little bit about that before we also dive into another aspect of the work of remembering and acting on the global scale on events that are of interest as you do today with the Wallenberg Centre.
Yeah, so just in terms of, and in a minute, someone once asked me, what's the difference between a law professor and being a parliamentarian, let alone Minister of Justice? And I said, being a law professor is an ongoing seminar, but a parliamentarian or a Minister of Justice means you have to make decisions. You have to decide in real time. And when you have to decide in real time, it may be also that lives are at stake. And you have to learn how to work across the aisle with people from other parties, because at the end of the day, we're trustees of the people that elected us. And they elected us so that we should pursue justice in common cause.
Thank you. And I always I've heard this lesson. I take it to heart as if it was it's your mother's lesson. You take it to heart. I don't know. It's my grandmother's lesson. Know the suffering about the people you're trying to serve as a human rights lawyer. And I will make my last question about the story of Raoul Wallenberg and the impact it has had on you, because when you left Parliament, I was one of those who came to you with advice. How about we name your center about Irwin Cotler Centre? And you obviously chose to bear witness to the memory of this incredible man who stood up against a very powerful machine of destruction. And the work you've set us for the institution, what you've set it up to do on behalf of political prisoners, would-be victims of genocide and others. Maybe we can close on that and then take a few questions. The story of Raoul Wallenberg and what it represents as a response to so many of the conflicts and challenges you've taken up over the years.
Well, Raoul Wallenberg was Canada's, first honorary citizen, a man who demonstrated how one person with the compassion to care and the courage to act can confront evil, prevail, and transform history. Let me just put it in one nutshell, that from mid-May to the beginning of July 1944, when nobody could say at that point, we did not know, 440,000 Jews were deported to the death camp Auschwitz, the cruelest, most efficient, quickest killing field in all of the Holocaust. And the bystander community was letting it happen. Raoul Wallenberg arrived as a Swedish diplomat in the Swedish legation in Budapest in mid-July 1944. And the next 6 months, through bravery and bravado, through mobilizing other diplomats, through the Schutzpass, the diplomatic passports conferring immunity on the recipients, through setting up safe houses, etc. In a word, Wallenberg ended up saving 100,000 Jews. So what the entire international bystander community did not do to save 440,000 Jews sent to their death at Auschwitz, one person, as I said, with the courage to care, the compassion to care and the courage to act, confronted evil, prevailed, transformed history. That's why he became our first honorary citizen, and that's why we named the Wallenberg Centre after him. And the 5 pillars of the Wallenberg Centre reflect that inspirational thing. The first being paying tribute to heroes of humanity, along with Wallenberg, Nelson Mandela, Elie Wiesel, René Cassin. The second pillar is the Holocaust, genocide, and human rights, universal lessons for the preventing and combating of mass atrocity in our time, which we've been discussing. The third is combating the resurgent global authoritarianism as part of protecting and renewing democracy and human rights. The fourth is defending political prisoners who are a looking glass into this resurgent global authoritarianism. And the fifth is, empowering women. And I think we should appreciate that women now are at the forefront of a lot of the protest movements that we see today, whether they are in Belarus or in Sudan or Venezuela. And regrettably, women are more and more becoming political prisoners on whose behalf we have to act.
Thank you very much, Prof. And I think and I hope all our listeners have had a few minutes of the insight on the inspiration and the encouragement that you've been for so many of us over the years. The reality is that even in the face of improbable odds, whatever you do as an individual always matters, and sometimes it matters far more and far beyond your wildest reach and wildest imagination. So the story of Raoul Wallenberg, who unfortunately we never actually found out, he's never received a proper burial, much like many he tried to save and couldn't in the Shoah. Is one such illustration of even when you look at the indifference, the many things that have to conspire to come together and make a genocide possible, there's always the opportunity for us to rise to this challenge. And that's what I hope we are reminded of as alumni of the March of Remembrance and Hope, and those who couldn't go this year, you still feel empowered by taking a look at the past and feeling inspired and empowered to do your best in the moment. So without further ado, I believe I will pass it to Joe for some closing remarks, with very deep thanks, Prof, for making time. I know it's a very hectic time where you are, but hope doesn't fade, and better times for sure shall come in not so distant future.
And Joe, it's good to see you as well.
It's on to you, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Yes, Professor Cotler, it's good to see you again. I think I've made a habit of introducing or thanking you at numerous events like this. My name is Joe Gottdenker, and I'm a child survivor, more specifically a hidden child. If the Jolo family had not taken me into their homes at great risk to their family, as harboring Jews was a capital offense with summary execution, and this was unique to Poland. None of the other countries in Europe had this specific law. If not that, I would have been one of the 1.5 million Jewish children murdered during this horrific period in our history. And in spite of all the evidence, there are people and even countries that deny it ever happened. And it is why I have devoted myself to a number of organizations who are involved in educating people about the Holocaust, which is one way to ensure it doesn't happen again. Not only another Holocaust, but any other form of genocide. The Armenian, which was just recently recognized by the US, Bosnia, Rwanda, and the list goes on. And specifically one that I had an experience to learn about in my MRH trip, and that is the genocide against the Baha'i in Iran. Doesn't come up very often, but what I heard from this young man and how he saw many of his family summarily executed or taken away and never seen again, it is a genocide. One of the organizations that I'm involved in is MRH, March of Remembrance and Hope. It is specifically important to me because it allows me to interact with young people, mainly not Jewish, in the places in Poland and Germany where the Holocaust was planned and executed. I wish to thank Professor Cotler for his lifelong ongoing contribution to human rights, combating anti-Semitism, racism, and genocide. And I'd like to comment on a couple of things that you said, Professor Cotler. And one was that anti-Semitism existed well before the Holocaust, during the Holocaust, and even exists now. The other thing you mentioned is your involvement with Elie Wiesel. One of the things that I remember when I heard one of his speeches, this was in Washington at the 10th anniversary of the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And he said there were 3 types of people during the Holocaust. There were the victims, there were perpetrators, and there were the bystanders. And the bystanders enabled Hitler and his henchmen to do what they did. And this is what I'm trying to, as much as possible, instill in people: do not be a bystander. Another thing that Elie Wiesel said, I believe, is a person who saves one life saves all of humanity. The other thing, Professor Cotler, that I picked up from your speech or talk is that Auschwitz and what it represents. I have been there numerous times. And one time in particular, I was really, really taken aback when my Polish guide said that she's taken through a lot of German school children. And many of them had brought up the preposterous comments that Auschwitz was built by the Polish people as a tourist attraction. So you can see how far this insanity goes. And Eloge, sorry if I don't pronounce your name right, but my name's always mispronounced. It's Eloge. I met a number of Rwandan victims, survivors, I should say, of the Rwandan genocide in Poland on the MRH. And I noticed that they were affected by what they saw at the death camps, at Auschwitz, and all these places. It stood out to them because I guess they recalled what happened in Rwanda not that long ago. There were, unfortunately, the victims of the Holocaust are very slowly diminishing, and it is incumbent on people like me, a child survivor, take up where they left off. And I'm speaking about people like he was on all of the trips with us, and just a fantastic gentleman, and has such a great insight into what happened. And if I could remember his name, I'd be all right. And I see him all the time. So at this time, I'd like to ask that the participants in all of these events make a call to action, because this is how we're going to not eliminate completely, but downplay what has happened. And there are a lot of resources that you can go to get information about the Holocaust. There's Yad Vashem here and in Jerusalem, and many, many organizations, Holocaust museums, and go there, learn from what they have to offer, and then pass it on. And I wish to thank everyone who's involved in this organization.
Thank you so much, Joe, for your comments. And I am just going to, first of all, fix my camera. And now I'm going to just ask the question that we had come in, and this will be our one and only question, because unfortunately we're out of time. I am going to ask Professor Cotler and Eloge, perhaps in that order, if you could both speak to this question. This was submitted by a teacher of history, and it reads, what do you think are the most important steps and actions that young people and all people can do to prevent and intervene in genocide today and in the future? So perhaps, Prof, if you want to go, and then Eloge.
So I would say that, as a generic approach, one should seek justice for the victims and accountability for the violators. And therefore, in terms of securing justice for the victims, I'll use, if I may, the Uyghur situation, the mass atrocities against the Uyghurs as an example. We need to mobilize the international community. And we set up in that regard the first ever inter-parliamentary alliance on China, because China has been bullying the democracies one by one, Australia, Japan, Canada, but by bringing together parliamentarians across party lines from over 20 democracies, we're reversing this asymmetrical relationship. Number two, we need to bring the governments of the democracies together, acting in concerted action. The importance, therefore, of multilateral action by the community of democracies. Number three, we need to use the international instruments at our disposal. For example, we need to call for an independent, international, impartial, unfettered, investigative mechanism to be able to go to China and document what is happening. Of course, the Chinese authorities are not allowing that to happen, but they are just incriminating themselves. And number four, we have to pass the necessary legislation to prevent the import of labor, goods, I should say, that is the product of, at this point, slave labor in China and the like. And we need to prevent the use of technology, because China has set up the largest technological surveillance authority in government history, what Yona Diamond from our Raoul Wallenberg Centre, the most technologically sophisticated genocide. And finally, we have to understand what is happening there, that these are mass atrocities that constitute acts of genocide under the Genocide Convention. They include, number one, the mass incarceration of over 1.8 million men, women, and children as young as 13 years of age, Uyghurs, who are not only incarcerated in these detention camps, which the Chinese authorities try to pass off as re-education centers. And I'm reminded of the fact that when the Germans set up Dachau in 1933, they also called it a re-education center. So some things don't change. But the concentration camps are being used as well to target the people there for forced labor and enslavement, rape, torture, disappearance, and even murder. Second, coercive population controls, mass sterilization of women, coerced abortions, and the like. Number three, forced separation of 500,000 Uyghur children from their families. Number four, state orchestrated incitement, referring to the Uyghurs as cancerous tumors that have to be eradicated. Number five, a state orchestrated assault on Uyghur religion, language, culture, memory, life, and the destruction of 2/3 of the mosques. So what we're seeing here now is a genocide unfolding before us, and we have to, and it has been mentioned by Joe and we have to take the necessary action, as I said, to bring justice to the victims and accountability for the violators.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think what I would only add is the ability to the one consistent theme I hope we got out of Prof's experience is remaining engaged. There's no substitute to staying shoulder on the metal, trying to keep both the world's attention on these atrocities and the hard policy and political work of moving governments and corporations and other actors to behave in ways that are responsible. If no one is looking, it's cheaper, it's easier for people to overlook that and say, but if my next cell phone is cheaper, I don't have to worry about it. If my next pair of jeans is cheaper, I don't have to worry about the heavy cost that comes with all of that. So remaining engaged and not allow ourselves or the decision makers to look away, and obviously choosing to serve as decision makers and showing up when that matters is one first piece. The other piece is we are living in the age of information technology. There's TikTok and the other talk and the grams and all those things that are flooding our minds with information, but not equipping us with the ability and the sense of discernment. And if you look back to all this genocide, it's not a coincidence that they all came with a very heavy and serious propaganda instrument. And as Prof mentioned, it didn't start with the gas chamber, it starts with words. But this ability to go and mess with our minds and inoculate us to actually really exercise proper judgment, rise as the Raoul Wallenberg when it matters, when the diplomatic consensus was, and there were thousands of diplomats in Hungary when Wallenberg was alone trying to save 100,000 Jews. And the ability to actually have your mind clear and clear enough to know the right thing when you see it is probably it's never been threatened as much in our lifetime, considering the volume of information and the limited resources one has to train themselves to do that. So those are the two things I would say: stay engaged, but also push hard to see these truths. Go back to the MRH if you can, come to Rwanda when you can, and equip your own mind and soul to exercise judgment and discernment when it actually counts.
What a beautiful note to end on. And so I'm going to thank our participants, thank those who joined us, Eloge, Joe, Prof. Thank you so much for the gift of your time and for answering these questions with such heart, with such vision, and Eloge, to borrow your word, such clarity. We want to remind you that this is only the beginning of an enduring conversation we hope to cultivate in the months to come. So please do follow us on social media. Please do, if you have thoughts or conversation prompts or questions after the event, please do reach out to us, even if only to update us into where you are. What I will ask very briefly is participants, you are free to go. Guests, if you could just stay on for one moment, we're going to take a brief photo to commemorate this time together. It has been precious. So thank you again for all those of you who joined us. Prof, did you leave now?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Like, no, don't leave. Amazing. Okay, so Jason is going to give us instructions. Jason, I'm sure